Hello and welcome to this video all about how to write a Handmaid's Tale essay. So before you watch this video, I'd recommend going and watching the petal paragraph video first. Just gives you a really nice basic overview of the main paragraph structure that you want to use for all of your combined essays. So if you've not watched that or you feel like you're not really sure what that is, go and watch that first and this video will make a lot more sense. So basically the plan is we're going to remind ourselves of the mark scheme, what we're being marked on, bit of a reminder as to the exam question and what you'll get in the exam, and then how to plan and how to write, and we'll have a look at some example answers as well. Okay, so first of all, a quick reminder of the three AOs, so the three assessment objectives you're getting marked on. So AO1, how well you construct an argument in response to the question using terminology patterns. So that's all about language levels and making sure that you're approaching the question with a stylistic approach. So rather than just picking out random examples of metaphors or verbs or whatever techniques, it's about looking for patterns. Is there a pattern of dynamic verbs, or are they stative verbs? Is there a pattern of metaphors that creates a semantic field of something? So it's about looking at the text as a whole. AO2 is all about the writer's craft as well as the voice and how well the voice of the character has been crafted. And it's about recognising that Offred and Janine and Moira don't exist as real people. Atwood has crafted them to be how they are, warts and all. So how has she done it and why has she done it as well? And then last but not least, we've got AO3, which for this exam is predominantly about the context of production and reception. So about the 1980s and what was happening at the time and what might have influenced Atwood to write, as well as what's happened now. And obviously between sort of the 6 years that this scheme has been operating, lots of things have happened. We've had Brexit, we've had Trump's administration, we've had Me Too, and it's about picking the specific things that make sense with that question. So if you get a question on the commander, it makes a lot of sense to talk about Trump. A question on Nick or Janine, possibly not. So it's about choosing the right context for the right question. And also the fact that it's a dystopian text. So how do we know that it's a dystopia? How does it fit in with the general generic conventions of a dystopian text? So let's have a look at the mark scheme in a little bit more detail. So what I've done is put the top grade descriptors in this bottom row, just so you can see what a top grade answer is looking for. So AO1 is 10 marks out of the 35, and that's all about, as we said, methods and bringing in linguistic and literary study as appropriate. So making sure we've got a nice range of language levels and methods, and making sure that it's written with coherent expression. So making sure that it makes sense, which in an exam isn't always a given. So just checking the way that you're phrasing things, making sure that it makes sense, that your ordering is right. And that's where, you might have heard me mention petals earlier on, that's where your petal paragraphs come in. So for a top mark, so between sort of 13 to 15 marks, what we want is specific language levels that have a sustained relevance to the question. So you're not just picking out anything that you can find in a really sort of worried and slapdash method. There's a reason why you've chosen the things that you have to analyse. And it's evaluating the patterns as well. So it's about digging deep into the patterns and why they've been used. Again, a range of terms accurately. So making sure that if you're saying that it's a stative verb, that it is. If you're saying it's past tense, that it is, or homodiegetic or heterodiegetic. It's just knowing your stuff, basically. And that's really easy to revise. It's just sort of looking through your terms booklet, making sure that everything makes sense. And then finally, again, it's about that kind of expression. So your writing is sophisticated. You're not using rubbish language choices, basically. It's formal language, and you're developing your ideas too. Then again, with 10 marks is your AO2, which is all about the way that writers shape meanings in text. So For, again, 9 to 10 marks, we're looking at a thorough and open-minded analysis. And that's by thinking about the question focus subtly. So not picking the most obvious extracts for whoever it is or whatever the extract is. It's about thinking kind of a bit outside the box. So the examiner will think, I've not seen that interpretation before. That's worth an extra couple of marks. Providing a perceptive interpretation of the extract given and the extract chosen. So again, not just picking the obvious things to analyse, picking the more complex ideas to focus on and looking at it in a perceptive way. Carefully selecting your extracts, both the wider extracts that you need to link to, but also the things that you talk about from the given extract, and making sure that all the things that you're saying are fully relevant. And then also looking at how meanings are shaped by narrative techniques. So that's how Atwood crafts Offred's character. So not just picking out the fact that it's first person and it's written in using first person pronouns. That is not perceptive. It's looking at how we know who she is. Does she use idiolect or dialect? The fact that she thinks more than she speaks. It's the sort of things that make the character who it is. And looking at writer's craft through close analysis of detail. So again, really picking apart those metaphors and the patterns that you've chosen and the semantic fields. And then interestingly, AO3 is worth 15 marks. So it's the biggest weighted AO, which often tends to be left right until the end. So it's about having an understanding of the significance and influence of the context in which it was produced, so the 1980s, and received, us reading it now. But it's about making sure that you're looking at specific influences on context and the production of it. So and also obviously our interpretation. So you can't just say for 14 and 15 marks, the commander links to Donald Trump. You have to give specific examples. So you have to talk about the rollback of women's rights under the Trump regime. Can you give an example of the laws that he passed? Can you link specifically to Reagan and the New Right and what they did? If you get a question on Serena Joy linking to Phyllis Schlafly and the Christian New Right and the movement against feminism, you've got to be precise. And that's the same with fantasy elements with this. It's dystopian conventions, so you need to make sure that you're linking specifically to dystopian conventions. You can link to other dystopian texts as well, so you can talk about sort of fear as a method of control and how that's seen both in Handmaid's Tale and how it's seen in 1984, for example. Or you could contrast the way that societies control people, whether it's through fear or through sort of drugs and propaganda in Brave New World, for example. But again, it's making sure that you know what those genre conventions are so that you can make the appropriate links when you come to it. Okay, so a quick reminder to what the exam will offer you. So you'll be offered 2 questions to choose from, and this is, apart from the Paris extract, this is the only text where you'll actually get the extract printed on the exam paper. So use it, annotate it. You can write on your exam paper, that's absolutely fine. Make the choice of question really quickly and stick with it. You've only got 60 minutes, so you need to make sure that you're making that choice very quickly, because you've only got between 5 and 10 minutes to plan. So don't dither about. Pick your question and go with it. You'll also be given a clean copy of The Handmaid's Tale. So again, don't write in this, but it does mean that you don't need to learn any quotes or anything like that. That's not what this exam is testing. It's about testing understanding and analytical skills rather than having to remember quotes off the top of your head. But you will need to know what happens in different parts of the text, Otherwise, you're going to struggle picking things out. So you need to know vaguely where things happen in the novel, which is a bit confusing because obviously it's flashbacks and things like that. You do, same with Streetcar, have to talk about 2 other extracts from the novel. But again, similar to Streetcar, what you don't want to do is do half an essay on the given extract and then the other half an essay on the 2 extracts that you've chosen. You want to link to them throughout. So if there's a pattern of metaphors that describes Offred as being like a child, or there's one specific one where she's talking to the commander and she feels like a kitten in a window, she feels like she's being observed, you could link to another pattern where she feels like she's being watched, if that's what the question is. Or you can talk to a bit, you could link to a bit from her past where she feels anonymous, for example. So you want to build in quotes and ideally patterns from other parts, but you don't need to analyse them in the same sort of detail as you would the given extract. Mainly talk about the given extract. You want to make sure that you focus on the theme. The focus will be, on a theme or a character or a setting. So you might have Janine or Nick, but you could equally have, in the past, I think we've had a question about the role of men in the novel, or the role of memories, or something like that. So this is an example question. So explore the significance of Offred's relationship with Nick in the novel. You should consider the presentation of their relationship in the extract below and at different points in the novel, and the use of fantasy elements in constructing a fantasy world. So with this question, you might be given the bit where she first goes to see him, which is a really good bit to look at. You might choose a bit from where she's not sure, right at the end of the text, where Nick is sort of, get in the van, everything will be fine, and that's confusing. But you could also choose to contrast it with an extract where you've got Offred's relationship with Luke, or with the commander, for example, to show how loving-ish their relationship is, and what the relationship is providing for Offred in this time compared to the relationship she has with the commander, which is purely for him. So there's different things that you can do perceptive-wise, particularly if we're thinking back to the mark scheme at the beginning. Okay, so what we want to do is spend no more really than 5 minutes planning, ideally. Like I said, you've got in the timings up to 10 minutes, but obviously the more time you plan, the less you've got to actually write. So try and stick to 5 minutes, or as close to 6 as you possibly can. First things first, highlight the main focus of the question. So that other one is Offred's relationship with Nick. So make sure that you know, so rather than it just being the significance of Nick, which is a slightly different question, it's the significance of her relationship with Nick. So again, with the mark scheme, it's that perceptive interpretation of the question. Some people might just go straight in with things about Nick, but it's about their relationship. So read the question carefully. Then read the extract, try and place it in the novel. So where is it from? Is it a flashback? Think about what's happened just before it. If it's a flashback, is there something that's brought that flashback on? And then think about how the focus of the question is being presented. So how is their relationship being presented here? And try and get some adjectives down. Because once you've got those adjectives, you can then start to think about, right, what patterns and semantic fields are creating that impression? So it's a bit like a Paris question. So if you think their relationship is being presented as secretive, or suspicious, or confusing, find those patterns that tell you that. You have to link everything to quotes. Think about dialogue and description. Do they differ? Particularly in Gilead, Offred tends to not say very much out loud in speech marks, but she'll think a lot. So make sure you've got the difference between spoken dialogue and description, or Offred thoughts around something, because they often do differ. Once you've got some kind of ideas down, pick your top 3 patterns and semantic fields, ideally with a range of language levels, and these are going to be your paragraphs. So you've got your paragraphs written straight away. And then just try and find 2 other places in the novel that focuses on the same theme. can you tie them in with the given extract somehow? So is there a logical, similarly in this extract, Offred, da 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 da. Or you can have a contrast and say, whereas Offred in this extract is this, in this extract it's this. So you can show that you've thought about different interpretations of the question. So for example, for that men question, if it gives you an extract of the commander, purely the name the commander, the epithet the commander, tells us how powerful he, supposedly is. Whereas, and this, you could pick someone like the doctor, who Offred acknowledges, although he's very polite to her, he has the power to get her sent to the colonies. But you could also look at someone like Nick, or you could look at the Angels or the Guardians, or you could look at men in kind of the flashback of Luke being caught, for example. It's quite interesting. Loads of different people and different men that you could actually look at. So once you've got those, then just have a think about how Atwood is using Offred's voice in this extract. So are there any specific patterns that you notice about how Offred is being presented in this extract? So what could you say about her as a character in this extract? And again, when we talk about her voice, it's not just it's in first person or third person, because we know that most of it is in first person, apart from a couple of the flashbacks. So, for example, to what Moira is telling us. Other than that, it's all first person, so there's always going to be personal pronouns, and it's a really boring thing to say. So it's more about how she's being presented. Alright, so then we've got your intro. So there's a few things that you need to do in your intro. It shouldn't be super long, but you need to just give a very vague overview or very brief overview of the question focus and an indication of your line of argument. So how are you going to approach the question? What are you planning on? What is your line of argument going to be? Then with the given extract, how does the given extract link to the theme? Is there anything that needs to be explained? For example, any neologisms, or particularly if you've got a complicated question like inaction or memories of the past or something like that, you might want to give a brief overview of the importance of memories in the past for Offred. Just again briefly say which extracts you've chosen and kind of why, and I'll show you an example in a moment of an intro. And then just a bit about the novel. So, for example, you could link to the voice, you could link to any dystopian features or context features that might be useful to the focus of the question. And again, it doesn't need to be super long. So this is an example that I wrote earlier. So here's our checklist. So we've got our overview of the question focus, first of all. So this is a question about the significance of Moira. So in the novel, Moira is both a best friend and a direct foil for Offred. Where Offred is characterised by her inaction, only thinking about how she could rebel, Moira acts, becoming a symbol of strength in the novel. So it's just explaining overall what Moira is for. Then we focus down a bit more specifically to the actual extract. So in the extract taken from chapter 10, the extract taken from chapter 10 is a flashback to Offred's time at university where Moira is planning an underwhore party. This extract shows Moira's subversive character before Gilead, where her ability to embrace the taboos contrasts with Offred's more passive personality. So again, it's kind of just a bit more detail about this specific extract. Then the extracts that we've chosen. So Moira's tenacity is also shown in chapter 2, when Offred describes Moira's daring escape from the Red Centre. However, it's contrasted in chapter 38 when Offred meets Moira again in Jezebel's, where she's resigned to her forced role as a sex worker for commanders. Then just a bit about the novel or any dystopian features. Atwood uses Moira as both a symbol of hope for the reader and Offred, as well as a demonstration of the power of Gilead to break even the strongest spirit, a key dystopian convention. So it's only, I think it's 159 words. So, maybe if you're handwriting it, maybe 8 or 9 lines long, but it covers all of those things really briefly. And then basically, once you've done that, you're just petaling. You're just cracking on and doing as many petals as you possibly can in the time. So if you know that you struggle to build in both voice and context, because again, if we're thinking about the petal, context needs to be in there as well as just your normal analysis. You need to make sure that you are maybe thinking about doing a voice paragraph right at the beginning. So, like I said before, don't just write about pronouns because that's super boring. It's more about what makes her unique as a character in this extract, her language and the way that she acts. So remember, it's worth 15 marks for AO3. So you shouldn't just be tacking it on the end as your link. Ideally, try and weave it through your essay. But you need to make sure that you're still analysing patterns and semantic fields along with a wide range of language levels. So to help with that, like I said in the petal paragraph video, make sure that you've got bigger quotes at the beginning of your petal to prove the pattern, and then you can pick out specific individual words to focus on later on. If you're writing about dynamic verbs and you just have like jump, swing, bash, that's all you can talk about. Whereas if you have a bigger quote, you can comment on what type of sentence it is. You can comment on the mood it is. If there's any metaphors in there, you can pick that apart. If there's any other words that help to build up that sort of feeling, it's much better to do it that way than just have individual words. And again, we need to reference to other parts of the text, but build it into paragraphs about the base extract rather than having a separate paragraphs on their own at the end of the essay. Like I said before, it should mainly be about your given extract. And it's better having 3 to 4 paragraphs that are detailed than 5 to 6 that are just description. So take your time with writing. It's much better, like I said, to analyse in specific detail. And if you've got enough language levels picked out in those 3, then that should be more than enough. All right, so here's an example paragraph. I know the writing's just a little bit small, but hopefully it gives you an idea as to how you can build in a range of bits of AO3 as well as loads of terms and commenting on voice too. So this one is all about memories, Offred's memories of the past. So anything that's underlined in blue is reference to voice. This red bit is your point. Blue is terms. Orange is quotes. Green is analysis. Purple is context. So just in case you're wondering what the colours are. So in Offred's indirect thought, so straight away we've commented on the voice. Atwood uses a semantic field of constraints to present the past as a place of restriction for women. So we've got a semantic field, we've got Atwood is doing something, so it's writer's craft as well. And we've also got this semantic field. So don't open your door, make him slide his ID under the door, and don't stop on the road to help a motorist pretending to be in trouble. So what some people might do is just pick out those imperative verbs. So don't, make, stop. But if you do that, you've not got the opportunity to do any of those other term choices. Sorry. So the repetition of the imperative auxiliary verb don't in the asyndetic list of short sentences hyperbolizes the societal restriction women felt in the time before Gilead. Although not prescribed by the state, these imperatives suggest the implied physical control men had over women and go so far to prove Aunt Lydia's theories that the women are now safer in Gilead. Offred also uses a stative verb pretending to imply the methods men would use to control and assault women. Though as Offred at this point has been in Gilead for a while, it could imply that the regime's propaganda is having the desired effect. A common dystopian convention of using fear of others, in this case men, as a method of control. As Aunt Lydia reminds them of how much worse they were in the time before, Offred could now be exaggerating the fear she felt, a sign of her unreliable narration, as it could be at the time she did not feel like this. It is only in the new context of Gilead, where she's far away from the male gaze, that she is retrospectively hyperbolizing. This underlying threat of violence against women has been used by power structures as a method of control, such as dress codes that operate in many American schools, which often use the excuse of being distracting for boys as a reason to ask young women to change their behaviour. This is also perpetuated in rape cases when women are often interrogated about the level of inebriation and what they were wearing, with 55% of men in a survey conducted by The Independent agreeing that women are more likely to be assaulted if they are wearing revealing clothes. This then linked with Atwood's use of the patriarchal restriction of freedom as a method for justifying the nightmarish control of women by the state of Gilead. And that's 362 words. So what we can see with the colour is half of it is context. Quite a lot of it is context, but it's really specific context about this specific point. So it's about the restrictions that women had in the before time, and then how that is actually seen in reality. So it needs to be a specific link. So this bit down at the bottom is all about context of reception, so that's us. But we've also got this bit in the middle, which is about dystopian conventions too. We've got these 3 decent sized techniques, which then means that we've got a nice range of language levels that we can talk about. So we've got things about voice, indirect thought, unreliable narration, retroactively hyperbolizing. We've also got some kind of rhetorical devices with exaggeration. We've got listing, asyndetic lists. We've got sentence types. We've got sentence moods, imperatives. We've got repetition. We've got stative verbs. So there's a really wide range of terms, and then we've also got, again, really precise analysis of those words. So the fact that she uses a stative verb pretending is quite, by picking out pretending, so don't stop on the road to help a motorist pretending to be in trouble. That implies that men are lying about being broken down to try and attack women, which again is kind of scaremongering, isn't it? Which makes sense that women might feel worried about it. So that's what we mean by specific and detailed analysis that's also perceptive. It's about picking up on those little words and thinking, what does it imply and why does it imply it? And that's 362 words, so it's a decent sized paragraph, but it's not massive. It's not full page of A4. It's probably about kind of half a page, 3/4 of a page, maybe, obviously depending how much you write. So your paragraphs should be chunky. They shouldn't be kind of like 6 or 7 lines long. They should be detailed. Okay, so now it just leaves you to have a go. So the best way to get better and revise is by practicing. So have a go at planning, either just planning or planning and writing an intro and petal paragraph for this question. So read the extract printed below. This is from the section of the novel where the commander leads a religious service in his house. Explore the significance of Gilead's treatment of the handmaids in the novel. You should consider the presentation of the treatment of the handmaids in the extract below and at different points in the novel, and the use of fantasy elements in constructing a fictional world. So, obviously, because it's a video, you can pause yourself here and just make sure that you know what the question is, and then I'll leave a few seconds so you can pause the video on the extract as well. So here is the extract. I'm not going to read it to you. You're very intelligent individuals who have that power yourself. So I will leave you there. Good luck. And if you want anything reading, I'm sure that your teacher will be absolutely fine with that. Enjoy.